Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Eric Ames, and today we are going to be talking about how panning can make or break your mix. So right off the bat, what is panning? Panning is the function of moving things around spatially in your mix. That means making an instrument be heard anywhere from all the way to the left, right in the center, all the way to the right, or anywhere in between. Take this vocal track, for example. I can move it anywhere from the left to the right, back and forth. You needed me to be the tinder in your heart. We mix music primarily in stereo, meaning there's one speaker on the left and one speaker on the right. So just think about anywhere you typically listen to music, whether that's your car, a pair of headphones, or even your laptop. Each and every one of these things has two speakers left and right. If you listen to any music carefully, you'll hear that there are sounds coming from everywhere on the spectrum, left to right, and every single one of these things is done intentionally. Panning is one of the foundational ways in which we, as producers, make sure that everything in our song is audible to the listener. If nothing was panned, you would hear everything play back right from the center of the mix, and it would cause the whole song to sound like a jumble of sounds that are difficult to discern. Like you'd be listening to the song and you'd be like, I hear a bass, I hear guitar, vocals, drums, but it all kind of sounds mushy and on top of each other, and I don't really hear anything clearly. Basically, a song would go from sounding like this and now I lay in the bed to something like this. And now I lay in the bed. Hear the difference? But wait, what is panning? Like, what are you doing when you pan something in Logic or Pro Tools? And that's a great question. Panning, weirdly enough, is actually just a manipulation of a sound's volume. When something is unpanned or panned in the center of the mix, it's basically telling your speakers left and right, play the exact same thing out of both of these at the exact same volume, and it'll trick your brain into thinking the sound is coming from the middle. Of course, there is no actual middle speaker because, as we've been saying this whole time, there's a left and a right. But your brain doesn't really know that, and thus it perceives it as coming from like right in front of you. Have you ever listened to a song and you feel like some things are coming from right in front of your face, even though you have a headphone on each ear? Just listen when I play back this unpanned guitar track. Your brain's not going to hear left or right. It's just going to hear middle. So when you pan something, you're telling your speakers, hey, play it louder out of the left and quieter out of the right. And then, of course, your brain responds by saying, oh, it sounds like it's over there. So can panning actually make or break an entire mix? The answer is 1000% yes. I have friends send me mixes all the time just to get some feedback on, and very recently I had a buddy send me a song that was recorded in a pro studio, and it sounded really good. All the parts were recorded very well, but I felt like the mix was off a little bit, and after listening to the entire track, I was like, oh, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of panning happening. Like I felt like all of the instruments were kind of right in the middle of the mix, and there was no stereo spatialness happening, and it kind of just makes for a flatter sounding song. So in this case, even though the quality of the recordings was very high, the mix wasn't very satisfying to listen to. Now that we're clear on the basics of panning and what it all means, what goes where in our mix. Like anything in mixing or really any artistic field, there are standards and there are rules. Now, rules is going in air quotes because nothing in art is actually a rule. In fact, one of the best parts about being an artist is that you get to break the rules. With that being said, here is the standard formula for what goes where in a pop or rock, etc. mix. As this video goes on, I'll be popping a graphic on the screen every now and then, a graphic that I made with my absolutely incredible visual art skills, and it's just kind of a standard formula for panning. The kick drum, the snare drum, the lead vocal, and the bass always go in the center. These things are the foundation of your mix, and you can think of them like the fulcrum of a scale. They hold the entire thing steady so you can balance things on either side. Toms, drum overheads, aka the cymbals, percussion, piano, vocal harmonies, all of these things usually get panned in certain ways. For example, toms are usually panned left to right, just like how they are set up on the actual drum kit, which means you'll have a rack tom panned a little bit to the left, another rack tom panned a little bit to the right, and a floor tom or two floor toms panned even further to the right. Check out this drum fill and let me know if you can hear how the toms are panned around. Drum overheads are ideally recorded with 2 microphones, one over the left half of the kit and one over the right half of the kit. When you're mixing these, you can hard pan, which means pan all the way to one side, the left microphone and the right microphone, and then you'll hear something like the hi-hat and this crash cymbal on the left side, and this crash cymbal and the ride cymbal and maybe a china on the right side of the mix. Listen to this section of drums and pay attention to where the cymbal hits are coming from spatially. Pianos are ideally recorded with 2 microphones also, one covering one half of the piano and another covering the other half, which means when you put those into your mix and you hard pan them left and right, you'll kind of hear lower notes over here, higher notes over here, and as you move around the piano, you'll hear them go left to right. Usually, which is really cool, piano plugins, like virtual instrument plugins that mimic piano sounds, have this built in. So if you like go into your MIDI piano sound, your favorite piano sound, and you just play, you'll be able to hear the bass notes pan to the left and the higher notes pan to the right. Percussion, like a shaker or a cowbell, can kind of be put anywhere in the mix, whatever sounds the best. They're just fun little additions. Unless the basis of your song is a cowbell, like Don't Fear the Reaper, then that's kind of a different discussion. Vocal harmonies are fun because there are kind of 2 standard options. There's the option of stacking them in the center of the mix with the lead vocal, or double tracking them and panning one to the left and one to the right. We'll talk more about this in a little bit in more detail. And the only standard instrument I haven't talked about yet is guitar. Panning guitars is like a whole other discussion, so we're also going to touch on that in a little bit. So what if I don't have all the instruments I just talked about in my song? What if I have different instruments? Where do I put them? Here's how I think about panning in general. Like I said before, kick, snare, lead vocal, bass, always panned in the center. Everything else is kind of fair game. My philosophy is to always try and put like timbre instruments across from each other in the mix because I feel like that gives you the most balance. When I'm making rock music with the same set of instruments every time, I have a standard formula that I stick to. If I'm mixing a different genre of music with a different set of instruments, I have to use my brain a tiny little bit and figure out what the best options are. A great example of this is the first time I mixed a bluegrass band. The band came in and they had a mandolin, an acoustic guitar, a banjo, a dobro, which is like a resonator guitar, an electric bass, and vocals. They came in, we got all of the recordings done, everything was sounding good, and then when I was going to mix it, I was like, wait, where do I put everything in this mix? It was definitely daunting at first, but then I just applied my philosophy and everything was fine. I took the acoustic guitar and the mandolin and I panned them opposite from each other because they were both kind of holding down the song rhythmically and harmonically. And even though the mandolin's a little higher in pitch than the guitar, they're close enough where they balance each other out. Then I took the dobro and banjo, which were playing more supporting roles, but are relatively near each other octave-wise, and I panned those across from each other. Check out this clip of all 4 of those instruments playing together, and you'll hear how the mix sounds fairly balanced. Then, with the lead vocal in the middle as always, I asked the band to double track their harmonies. I put one left, one right, and check out some of the chorus and you can hear the mix as it is.
I'm back on the plane again, flying to nowhere land, stuck in the middle of a place.
Boom, a fairly balanced mix. Other examples of instruments with similar timbres would be 2 different synthesizers that are playing in roughly the same octave, or a cello and an upright bass, a trumpet and a clarinet, or a tuba and a trombone. Of course, none of these examples are perfect. A tuba and a trombone are not playing in the same octave, but there is some overlap and they're both low-range instruments, so when you hear them panned opposite each other in a mix, They balance each other out. Okay, hold on. What is the standard formula for mixing rock music that I mentioned before? Right. Well, most of this we already touched on. Kick, snare in the center, lead vocal, bass in the center, toms around, overheads around. It's the guitars. We did not talk about the guitars yet. It's the guitars that are the interesting thing here, and it's actually the mixing of rock guitars that inspired this entire video. When I was a teenager and I was writing pop punk music and trying to record it on my own, I was very, very frustrated because I couldn't get my guitar that was just banging out power chords to fit anywhere in the mix. And then I would listen to my favorite bands like Green Day and Blink-182, and I'd say, their guitars sound so big and huge and everywhere and powerful. Why don't my guitars sound like that? I mean, those bands also only had one guitar player, so what's going on in the mix? At some point, I don't know when or how, but I realized and learned that they were double tracking their guitar parts. This absolutely blew my mind. I mean, when you have a band like Avenged Sevenfold, they have two guitar players. The move is obvious. You just put one of their guitar tracks in the right and one of them in the left, and boom, you're in business. I mean, just listen to the intro of Unholy Confessions by Avenged Sevenfold. It's awesome. It's perfect. Two guitars, harmonies. It's great. But when there's only one guitarist in the band, like Green Day or Blink-182 or me when I was a teenager, and me now still actually, all you have to do is double track your guitar. Just record the same exact part a second time, pan one to the left, pan one to the right, and you'll say, poof, that's a full mix. Learning this absolutely changed my musical life. Check it out. If I only have one guitar track, there's not really anywhere to put it. I could put it in the middle, but then it's unclear what's happening.
And now I lay in the bed thinking of all that you said.
I can move it to the left or the right and it just sounds wrong.
And now I lay in the bed thinking of all that you said.
But when you bring in that double track, it just rounds the entire thing out perfectly.
And now I lay in the bed.
And a quick note before we move on from this topic, you can't just copy and paste a guitar track or any other track, duplicate it, and pan them and expect them to work in this way. The double track part has to be recorded in full by itself or it will not work right. And this makes sense if you think about it. If you take a guitar track and you copy and paste it into a new track, you send one to the left and one to the right, what is actually happening now? What's happening is that now you have two identical audio tracks playing out of the left and right channels at the same volume. And if you remember from the beginning of this video, your brain's just going to perceive that as being in the center of the mix. That is an extremely annoying lesson to learn while you're recording and mixing, so heed my warning now. So what if you're a singer-songwriter that's just recording acoustic guitar and vocals? Do you need to double track that guitar? The answer is that it's entirely personal preference. If you want a really intimate sound for your acoustic track, having one guitar track in the middle and a lead vocal and some harmonies, it's going to sound completely fine. There's not enough stuff happening in the mix for it to get all convoluted and make you need to pan things every which way. With that being said, you can totally double track your acoustic guitar, send one to the left, one right, and just see if you like it more. My philosophy is that there's never harm in recording more takes, more tracks, because we work in a digital age. You just don't have to use anything you don't want to use. It's not like you'll be wasting tape and you have to like cut the tape and see if it works and then undo it. It's not really a big deal. If you don't like it, don't put it in your mix. The last thing I want to touch on is where do you put your harmonies? Like I said before, there are two standard methods: double tracking left and right, and single tracking right underneath your lead vocal in the center of the mix. So which should you do? Again, totally personal preference. Personally, my favorite technique is to do the double track left and right because it kind of encases the lead vocal in the mix, and if you listen to soloed harmonies like this, it's a pretty cool sound.
I stood on the shore while you drifted out to sea, watching longingly.
Of course, you can also just record one harmony track and layer it in the center of the mix with the lead vocal, and that's perfectly fine too.
The tinder in your heart, but the fire wouldn't start.
It's just a different sound that might work better for some mixes and not others. It depends on the song. Actually, in this song that I've been showing you guys, I use both techniques in the same verse. So at the beginning of the verse, you have harmony stacked in the center like this.
The tinder in your heart, but the fire wouldn't start.
And then a few bars later, I switch to the double-tracked panned harmonies.
I stood on the shore while you drifted out to sea.
And like I said before, you can always double track your harmonies and not use them. And folks, that is it. Those are the basics of panning. Like everything in mixing and producing and any art form, there are a million factors at play at any given moment. With recording music, you have to take volume, effects, and the quality of the actual recording into consideration also. You can't just pan things in your mix, call it a day, and then go sit by the phone waiting for the Grammys to call with your nomination for Producer of the Year. Panning is just one of what feels like a billion techniques in music production. But with that being said, it is something that can totally take your mixes to the next level, especially if you're just starting out. So with that being said, leave a comment down below on any other mixing, recording, producing techniques that you'd like me to cover in a future video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something useful.